Well, one of the ones that I found was interesting was the stratosphere, and how stratosphere, how that's changing. Because I think in a couple of these trends I've seen really do have sort of an impact on a motor company like Ford, where in the case, if I understand the stratosphere correctly, there is this sort of trend where it's becoming less important to show one's wealth. It's more sort of important, you know, in how you handle that wealth rather than the ostentatiousness of showing people I'm a wealthy individual. And I can see that where that would impact for you. It would impact a company where they have a choice between buying a Lincoln MKZ or buying a Fiesta, which essentially do the same thing. They get you from A to B, but one obviously does it with more comfort, of course, but a little bit more extensive, ostentatious than driving, you know, to the same location in a Fiesta. So kind of comment on that, how that impacts Ford.
Well, it's interesting. For many years, we've been talking about the changing definition of luxury. And a couple years ago, I thought it's really not necessarily luxury that's changing. It's the tools in which we use to project wealth. There was more like shifting status symbols. And this is a particularly global trend because we say that if luxury or status is the language of wealth, the question is, what are you trying to say? And sometimes what we say we do with a whisper, and other times we do it with a shout.
Right.
And in here we talk about globally where it's more socially acceptable to be demonstrative with your wealth, and in other places where it is considered impolite to be that way.
Japan, I think, being the where it's most impolite, and I think the United States, at least in your survey, where it was the more acceptable.
Which surprised me a little bit. That caught me off guard. But we do know that in the U.S., the car used to be the quintessential status symbol. And indeed, many baby boomers, you know, who were born after 1947 would tell you that getting their first car was this gateway purchase into adulthood and an important symbol of freedom and independence. Now, if we were to ask young people today, many of them are more inclined to say that their cell phone is the most significant status symbol that they own.
Interesting.
So we, as a company, we strategize that, say, okay, if young people are not looking at the car as a status symbol, but constant connectivity is critical to the way that they live their lives, how can we merge those two? And that becomes the business case for having things like Sync and My 4 Touch, which pair Bluetooth-enabled devices so that they become hands-free, voice-activated.
Right.
So now the status isn't what your car looks like, but what your car can do for you.
Okay. Well, let's talk about Sheryl Connelly here for a minute. What attracted you to becoming a futurist? What does one have to do educational wise or personal interest wise to become a futurist?
So I'm a very unlikely futurist. It was an unexpected career choice for me. I came of age during this recession, so I'm a Gen Xer, and what that means is that I have a bachelor's degree in finance, I have a law degree, and I have an MBA, because there were no jobs, so I just stayed in school. I did practice law for a very short period of time in the state of New York, just long enough to know that it was not for me.
Yeah.
And so I wrote to Ford and thought that, and I had grown up in Metro Detroit, so Ford as a brand, as the ideal place to work, had always kind of been part of my experience as a young person, but I did not have a particular affinity towards cars. But I wanted to work for the company because I admired so many of the people here, and I wholesaled cars for the first 8 years of my career with the company, and I didn't think that I would succeed. I had this crisis of confidence that said, if you don't have that oil in your veins, car aficionado, under the hood expertise, then could you really succeed? And what I found is that I just really enjoyed the people. The dealers were extraordinarily generous with their time. They taught me the business, they taught me the industry. And I did that for quite some time, and then I had the opportunity to have a complete leap of faith and try something new. And I joined the Trends team, and that was 10 years ago. And I found very quickly thereafter that I was suddenly at home. It was the first job that kind of pulled in on all of those disparate educational degrees. The law school training taught me how to build a persuasive case, particularly if you're going to call yourself a futurist. You have to be able to back it with some persuasive data.
Right.
The finance taught me the business fundamentals. The MBA taught me the business, how to apply it to our products and to the different functions and operation or work streams within Ford. But I find oftentimes some of the best experience I had was wholesaling those cars to dealers. Because in the end of the day, what we're really trying to do is sell our point of view. And the success of a futurist is never whether or not they get the future right. It really is whether they have the ability to change people's minds about the way they see the world. And that's what this report is about.
Yeah.
We're trying to change the way people see the world and showcase a little bit of Ford's thought leadership.
Yeah, well, that brings up sort of, if you will, a philosophical question, in that some of these things that you identify in the report are such, in some respects, such a minutia, such a micro trend, if you will. So where does the fine line become between you as a futurist identifying what is legitimately a trend at an early stage and identifying something that, because you have now highlighted it, becomes a trend? You know what I'm saying? Where it sort of becomes viral. So what's that fine line?
So I think you're kind of like to kind of become its own self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah.
I suppose that it can, but we wouldn't write about it if we hadn't already been stumbling across it multiple times through our own research. What I think ultimately tracking trends, consumer trends, is about pattern recognition. So I spend 95% of my time reading, and after when you consume that kind of information, you just start to see things that repeat over and over. I mean, several years ago, I ran across an article called Information Lust, and I thought it was really interesting. But I have to be candid that I thought to myself, we're Ford Motor Company, we don't talk about lust. That's not
it's the core of the business, but you don't talk about it.
We don't talk about that. But I said, I think there's something here. And so we redefined it and we called it information addiction. And we said, why are we becoming so reliant on these devices? Why have they changed our life? And we said, well, it's because they control. It gives the person more control. Right. It allows more spontaneity. It gives me a greater sphere of influence around the people around me. And that's powerful. It could even translate into wealth and success. And if that hypothesis were proved to be true, our reliance, our demand for constant connectivity would only continue to grow. Yeah. And that's something that we use as a narrative to say, well, maybe we should invest more in this technology. But to be clear, I would, oh, please, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
To be clear, though, is that I'm only the front end of this. The translation of it in terms of what the vehicle does really is wholly dependent on our subject matter experts. So I don't say, here's what to do with the car. I say, here's the trend, and here's how other categories are responding, and then I hand it over to a designer, an engineer, a marketer, a powertrain expert, and they take their knowledge and pair it with these new insights and translate it into something meaningful to the product.
Okay, well, that was the question I was going to ask you. You said, what? So what happened?
Good, Chris, I predicted that.
Yes, that's perfect. You got a little crystal ball right there. No, but so how does you take that information in this report? What becomes the sort of the process by which it ends up flowing through Ford Motor Company?
So we cascade it. We cascade it through the publication of the book. We put it online, but we also do meetings, all-hand meetings or workshop meetings, and then we sit with these experts. And it's really, my favorite part is when we get to collaborate. My hope ultimately is that when I sit down with a subject matter expert, that together we can come up with new insights that neither one of us would have ever discovered on their own.
Right. Okay, great. Let's see, what else do we want to talk about here? Boy, I think I've pretty well covered most of the ones that I have on here, Sheryl. How do you go about, I assume now that 14 is out, that you're going to start looking at 15. Is this a regular yearly exercise, or is this something that you're going to do sort of every couple of years? How does that work out? And what are your plans for 15?
So for these collection of micro trends, we will try to publish a new report every year. So last year we did 13 for 2013 because we were trying to be clever. This year we thought that was unsustainable, so we said, well, 10 for 2014, and I think that we'll shoot for another 10 next year.
Okay.
But we won't know until we do the research. It's really going to be guided by what we observe in the marketplace. But we do hope to have a regular cadence of these reports. At the same time, that's what's very public-facing. Inside of Ford, there are some things that are for internal eyes only. And so those might be macro trends. And those stay around a little bit longer. Those might last 5 years, 10 years. But we continue to monitor them and say, are we watching the right things? So there, you use the altitude reference. So the macro trend being the 100,000 foot view,
Right.
these micro trends being the 10,000 foot view, and so we try to cover all the ground in between.
All the ground in between, then good. Is that FAA controlled airspace? No, I'm just kidding. Well, look, Sheryl, thank you so much for taking the time and telling us about it. And I will make sure that we've got a link to the study on the website so people can take a look at it. And we'll try to do this again next year and see how it all shakes out.
Thanks, I look forward to it.
Okay, thanks a lot so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.